If a financial crisis hits tomorrow morning, if the banking app on your phone freezes, or if a sudden government decree locks your account, how much of your wealth do you actually own? The uncomfortable truth that keeps the global elite awake at night is that you own absolutely nothing. The modern financial system was brilliantly designed to turn your hard work into a digital, illusionist set of numbers on a centralized screen that can be modified, monitored, or erased with a single click. But centuries ago, before the invention of credit scores and corporate banks, the richest men on earth operated under a completely different set of rules. They built massive, untouchable empires by doing something that today would be considered highly dangerous. They completely ignored the banks. They didn't save paper currency. They accumulated raw reality. If you want to break free from this digital dependency and protect your family from the structural collapse that is systematically being engineered behind closed doors, you must look back. You must learn how to bypass the middleman. And the first step to reclaiming your financial sovereignty begins with an unyielding rule of survival. Habit 1. The physical liquidity rule to fully comprehend the first great habit of ancient merchants. We must transport ourselves back to an era when the concept of wealth was completely inseparable from its material presence in the physical world. Today, the modern world has succumbed to a dangerous digital comfort zone. The average citizen feels entirely secure, keeping 100% of their life savings stored as abstract bits of data on a centralized server. We look at a smartphone screen, see a sequence of numbers, and blindly trust that this representation of our hard work will always be accessible, functional, and protected. This systemic blind spot completely ignores the structural risks of technological blackouts, geopolitical shifts, sudden policy updates, or liquidity freezes within the commercial banking institutions themselves. The ancient merchants of the Mediterranean, the silk traders of Asia, and the master financier families of the 19th century operated under a radically different paradigm. They adhered strictly to the physical liquidity rule. This foundational habit dictated that a highly strategic percentage of a person's total liquid wealth, traditionally between 15 and 25%, must be kept entirely outside the banking framework, converted into tangible, high-density physical assets under their own direct, uncompromised custody. This was not an act of primitive paranoia, but a calculated strategy of high-level wealth preservation. They understood a fundamental economic truth that modern society has forgotten. Capital that requires the permission of a third party to be accessed, validated, or spent does not truly belong to you. The assets selected for this physical liquidity pool were meticulously chosen based on 3 immutable criteria: universal value, high portability, and absolute resilience against time. They did not merely stockpile standard fiat paper notes, which could be rendered worthless by inflation or royal decrees overnight. Instead, they focused on finely minted precious metals, raw gemstones, or highly sought-after trade commodities that held intrinsic utility across different cultures and continents. If a sudden war broke out, if a corrupt regional ruler decided to impose localized capital controls, or if a primitive banking panic caused credit markets to freeze, these merchants remained entirely unaffected. While the masses panicked in front of locked bank doors or collapsing local markets, the sovereign merchant simply packed his portable wealth into a leather pouch, crossed the nearest border, and resumed business with his purchasing power completely intact. In our current macroeconomic environment, resurrecting the physical liquidity rule is the ultimate countermove against a heavily weaponized financial system. Applying this habit today does not mean hoarding decaying paper currency beneath your floorboards. Paper money is continuously devalued by design through the printing presses of central banks. Modern implementation means diversifying out of the purely digital grid. It means accumulating hard assets that possess absolute mathematical scarcity and real-world utility sets that do not require an internet connection, electrical power, or a bank manager's approval to retain their intrinsic value. When you establish a physical base of sovereign value, you remove the bank's ability to micromanage your life. You create a psychological and financial firewall that protects you during systemic panics, turning an unpredictable economic crisis into a mere temporary inconvenience. Habit 2. The linen envelope budgeting method during the rapid economic shifts of the 19th century. Ordinary families and elite estate managers alike achieved extraordinary levels of financial discipline without relying on complex algorithms, credit tracking agencies, or computerized spreadsheets. They utilized physical, low-tech systems designed to create maximum visual friction against the psychological temptation of overspending. The most famous and widespread of these practices was the linen envelope budgeting method. This ancient habit required the master of the household to physically materialize and segment the family's entire income, exact moment it crossed the threshold of the home. The incoming cash was immediately divided and placed into separate, distinctly textured linen or heavy paper envelopes. Each single envelope was strictly dedicated to a specific, non-negotiable category of life: basic sustenance, clothing, property maintenance, taxes, local trade credit settlements, and a highly sacred envelope known as the accumulation fund. Psychological mechanism driving this method was incredibly powerful. Because the money was tangible, every single transaction required a conscious, physical interaction. If a family member wanted to purchase a non-essential luxury item, they had to open the specific envelope dedicated to miscellaneous expenses. If that envelope is empty, the reality was stark and absolute. The purchase could not happen. No one would dare raid the accumulation fund or the sustenance envelope to satisfy a short-term because doing so meant visually and physically exposing the household to future vulnerability. This creates a massive contrast with the modern digital banking structure. Today, financial institutions deliberately design their interfaces to eliminate all possible friction. When your income is deposited into a single, unified digital bank account, your entire financial life becomes a blurry, abstract pool of numbers. Your grocery money, your rent money, and your future investment capital are all mixed together. This lack of boundaries tricks your brain into feeling richer than you actually are, encouraging impulse buys and spontaneous spending, only for you to realize at the end of the month that your wealth has evaporated into bank fees and consumer waste. Bringing the essence of the linen envelope method into the 21st century is an essential act of financial rebellion. Banks actively promote tools like contactless payments, instant digital credit extensions, and automated overdraft protections because they understand human psychology. When the brain does not experience the physical sensation of losing a resource, it fails to accurately measure the long-term impact of the transaction. By reintroducing strict compartmentalization into your income flow, whether through dedicated physical reserves or isolated, specialized digital vaults that require multi-step verification, to access you break the spell of easy spending. You force your mind to confront the true cost of every purchase, ensuring your capital is directed toward your own empire instead of being bled dry by the commercial market. Habit 3. Elite bartering. Modern economic textbooks often teach a flawed historical narrative, claiming that bartering was an unstable, primitive method of trade that was entirely perfected and replaced by the efficiency of modern currency and central banking systems. In reality, this is a calculated oversimplification designed to keep the population dependent on fiat currency networks. The truth is that the elite merchant classes of antiquity, the great industrial barons of the past, and the most powerful financial dynasties never actually abandoned the practice of bartering. Instead, they elevated and refined it into a sophisticated strategy known as elite bartering. While the average laborer was conditioned to run to the nearest town bank to exchange his physical energy for depreciating paper coins, paying transaction fees, conversion penalties, and handling charges at every step, the true masters of commerce bypassed the monetary grid entirely. They traded massive blocks of direct value for direct value, keeping their most lucrative operations completely independent of traditional financial institutions. Elite bartering operates on the core principle that money is merely one specific type of commercial currency. If you possess an extraordinary technical skill, proprietary intellectual property, strategic operational access, or high-tier industry connections, you possess a form of currency that is fundamentally superior to the paper money printed by governments. The merchant houses of the Renaissance routinely structured complex, multi-layered international agreements where no actual currency ever changed hands. A shipping magnate would trade transport logistics for importing rights with a textile producer, while a legal scholar would trade strategic counsel for a percentage of a future cargo shipment. They operated within closed, highly exclusive networks of mutual trust and capability. The standing of a member within this circle was not evaluated by an arbitrary credit score or a digital bank balance, but by their direct capacity to deliver real-world solutions and maintain an unblemished reputation of honor. By transacting value for value, they insulated themselves from the systemic risks of inflation, bank closures, and government overreach. When you internalize this philosophy and apply it to the modern business landscape, you immediately reduce your reliance on commercial banks. You stop viewing money as the only tool available to solve operational problems. If you need a premium service for your enterprise, you do not automatically look for a bank loan or drain your liquid capital. Instead, you look for a way to offer your own highest level competency to the provider in a direct exchange. This dynamic allows you to retain 100% of the wealth generated by your intellect. It prevents banking institutions from skimming percentages off your transactions through transfer taxes, processing fees, and interest rates. Elite bartering restores your position as a primary producer of value, putting you in complete control of your commercial network. Habit 4. The Hard Asset Vault, a historical analysis of the last 2 millennia, reveals an absolute, unwavering economic law. Every single fiat currency created by governments, monarchs, or central banks has ultimately lost its purchasing power and collapsed into worthlessness. From the Roman denarius, which saw its silver content systematically reduced by corrupt emperors until it became a simple piece of copper, to the modern paper currencies that lose value every single hour through the invisible tax of inflation. Relying on state-issued money is a mathematical guarantee of long-term financial decay. The patricians of ancient Rome, the merchant princes of Venice, and the financial titans of the 19th century understood this trap perfectly. To survive and thrive across generations, they mastered the strict habit of the hard asset vault. This discipline required an unyielding refusal to accumulate or measure long-term wealth in the volatile currency of the state. For these elite actors, the official currency of the kingdom or republic was treated merely as a temporarily transactional fluid. It was useful for paying immediate taxes, settling minor debts, and conducting daily low-level marketplace trades. However, the very moment a significant surplus of this state currency was accumulated, it was instantly converted into immutable hard assets that sat entirely outside the manipulation of royal decrees, political corruption, or the reckless overprinting of paper notes. They aggressively acquired productive agricultural lands, stone architectural properties in major commercial shipping hubs, ancient timber forests, and pure, unadulterated precious metals stored in highly secure, private vaults under their own sovereign defense. They knew with absolute certainty that an acre of fertile, food-producing soil or a structurally sound warehouse in a trading port would retain its exact relative value and utility 300 years into the future, completely regardless of which king sat on the throne, which empire collapsed, or which bank went bankrupt. They did not save money. They accumulated raw, undevaluable reality. The modern banking complex operates on the exact opposite premise. Your bank desperately wants you to keep your hard-earned capital parked in their synthetic financial product safe accounts, certificates of deposit, or long-term mutual funds that offer yields that fail to match the real-world inflation of essential goods. They do this because it allows them to use your cheap digital deposits to go out and purchase real, tangible assets that generate true generational power. Breaking out of this cycle requires a complete mental shift. You must stop thinking like a passive saver of digital currency and start acting like an aggressive accumulator of hard assets. Convert the fluctuating digital numbers on your screen into physical, mathematically or highly productive assets that protect your time and energy from being silently stolen by the banking system. Habit 5. The community ledger system. Throughout the Middle Ages and into the early dawn of the European Renaissance, the vast majority of local trade villages and agricultural communities managed to cultivate immense prosperity, completely independent of large-scale feudal usurers and the primitive centralized banking networks of the era. Because physical coinage was heavily restricted, highly taxed, and dangerously scarce, these decentralized populations engineered an incredibly elegant, trust-based accounting methodology known as the community ledger system, or the local book of credit. This systemic habit completely bypassed the need for an external financial intermediary to facilitate commerce. The entire framework was built upon the bedrock of personal reputation, mutual reliance, and transparent, cross-verified community accounting. For example, if a local miller urgently required a shipment of timber from the village lumberjack to repair his damaged wall, but the harvest season had not yet arrived, the miller did not travel to a city bank to beg for a high-interest loan. Instead, the lumberjack delivered the wood, and the exact value of the resource was simply transcribed into the community ledger as a credit for the lumberjack and a debit for the miller. Months later, when the harvest was processed, the miller would deliver flour to the village baker, who would then supply daily bread to the lumberjack. Through this continuous, interconnected circle of production, the debts and credits within the ledger were naturally balanced and liquidated. The entire economic ecosystem expanded and thrived without a single physical coin changing hands, and without an external financial entity extracting a profit from the process. The true collateral backing this localized credit network was not a gold reserve in a distant capital city, but the productive capacity, work ethic, and word of honor of the individual members of the community. In our ultra-connected digital era, resurrecting the core philosophy of the community ledger system is one of the most revolutionary ways to achieve structural independence from the commercial banking cartel. Today, this old habit is reborn through the creation of highly coordinated private business networks, closed corporate ecosystems, and direct peer-to-peer financing frameworks. When a group of independent entrepreneurs, suppliers, and service providers unite to form a trusted economic alliance utilizing modern digital ledgers, direct asset swaps, and internal credit clearinghouse, is they effectively strip the traditional bank of its power. You no longer need to pay exorbitant merchant processing fees. You no longer rely on restrictive commercial lines of credit, and you protect your network from the sudden credit crunches that routinely cripple the mainstream financial markets.